So here's what I found when I went for looking for oak galls in the woods. At first I couldn't find anything. I was able to find lots of beautiful oak trees, of course, some of them with acorns starting to sprout. Lovely. Look great in the fall. But it took me hours and hours of searching until I found this one branch that had what I would recognize as oak galls, where it's the woody growths around a small wasp larva, or seed, egg I suppose, and then it hatches into a larva. But then after doing some online reading, I discovered that sometimes the galls also form on the acorns themselves, create these bizarre growths. So once I knew to look for that, I went back to the same place and found lots of them. So there's the galls forming around an acorn. So the first thing we have to do is we have to start removing the galls, which are on the acorns are quite sticky. So we have to dry them out a bit so that they'll be easier to process. Because they need to be crushed. So I'll take these off the plant, let them start drying out just for a day or so. And then we can crush them and start making our ink. The woody galls here you can see the brown ones are already partially dry, and they're not sticky at all, and coming off quite easily. Later in the season, when the wasp hatches, it'll actually drill out a little hole in these balls. So I might actually save one of these and let the insect hatch out of it just to see what that's like. Because, capture and release, I don't want to have a huge impact on the local flora and fauna. And although these insects are having a small impact on, I suppose, their reproduction of the oaks, because they're destroying the acorn, it's not actually harming the tree in any way at all. And there are plenty of healthy acorns around, so it's not really having much, that insect isn't having much of an impact at all on the local flora and fauna. And it is part of the ecosystem. But we can use these little galls to make ink. So yeah, I'll find more and chop them up and let them dry out, and I'll show you that. Very woody and dry and powdery, the inside of these galls. Well, it makes me quite curious that it's kind of a cork-like texture, but it is oak. So I'd be curious to see if I could do the same thing with oak sawdust. Or if there's something more unique to this. What makes up the galls. There's some sort of extra unique ingredient. From what I understand, from what I've read, it's mainly the tannins that we're trying to get out of there, out of the wood. And then we'll soak this in water for a few days. I have some rainwater here. Just cover this up. Rainwater. From what I've read, you leave it to soak for a couple of weeks. I don't have that much time, so if the water doesn't start going a dark brown, I've also read that you can boil it to speed up the process. And then the key feature to making the ink is you end up with a dark brown liquid, all the tannins being soaked out of the wood, and then you add iron to it in the form of iron sulfate, which I don't have at the moment, but you can make it by adding iron to an acidic mixture. So I'll make it with steel wool and vinegar, which I'll show you in a second. we need about half as much iron sulfate as we have the liquid from the oak galls. This is just distilled malt vinegar. Push the steel wool down into there. Acid and the vinegar will start stripping the iron out of the steel wool and just rust it. And then the iron bonds with the tannins to create a permanent ink. I'm really impressed. After just just soaking overnight, and the liquid has gone really dark from the oak galls, and also the liquid from the galls that were on the acorns. It's gone really dark, so after a couple of days, should be looking great. Try straining some of the, try straining oak galls because they look like they're ready to go. So I'm just adding some of the iron sulfate to the tannins. Ooh, very nice. Got pretty well instantly went black. And the final ingredient for the recipe in making the ink is this stuff called glare. It's a substitute for gum arabic, since I don't have any at the moment, and but I found out that you can make glare from egg white. You just whip up the egg white, and they call it hyper whipped, and then you let it settle overnight, and this is the liquid that settles at the bottom of the bowl. You strain off all the kind of white crust that was formed from whipping the egg white, and this is the leftover. It's called glare, and it's a thickening agent, traditionally used in ink and in paint. Now I'm just adding a small amount of glare to the ink mixture just to see what effect it has. So I'll give this ink a test run.